I discovered the affair in the worst way possible, not through whispers or rumors, but through cold, hard digital proof. My wife, the center of my world, had shattered our vows on the sands of Belize. Every secret meeting, every illicit moment, carved deep scars into what we once called love. As I plotted my revenge, the words, "I have you in my hands, you idiots," echoed in my mind, fueling my resolve. This is my story of betrayal avenged. Enjoy watching it. We eagerly awaited the arrival of the passengers at the airport's baggage area. Accompanying me were my brother-in-law, Bob, along with his two daughters, Danica, who was 9 years old, and Louise, who was 7. My own children, David, aged 12, and Sheila, aged 9, were also by my side. The children held up a large sign above their heads that read, "Welcome home, mommies." 2 weeks prior, my wife Mandy and her sister Helen had gone on a vacation to the beautiful beaches of Belize. This was a wonderful way to escape the harsh Minnesota winters, especially in the month of January. Finally, the passengers from the plane began to emerge from the door. The children erupted into screams of joy as they caught sight of their mothers. Both women looked stunning with their sun-kissed tans and radiant smiles. Mandy kissed David and Sheila affectionately, embracing them tightly. Then she turned to me and rewarded me with a passionate kiss. I held her close, reluctant to let go. "I missed you so much, honey," I whispered. Mandy replied, "Just wait until tonight, my love. I'll show you just how much I missed you." And indeed, that night she certainly proved it. After 15 years of marriage, she knows exactly what pleases me. One of the things she knows is how much I am attracted to tan lines. Once the children had gone to bed, we made our way straight to the bedroom. "Honey, get into bed and be ready for me when I come out of the bathroom," Mandy instructed. In an instant, I found myself waiting eagerly in bed. A few minutes later, Mandy emerged from the bathroom wearing a revealing thong bikini. Mandy's most captivating feature has always been her beautiful face. Her face was simply made for smiles. Wherever she went, she had the most enchanting smile. However, she was often her own harshest critic when it came to her body. She felt she was too short, too thin, and that her breasts were not large enough. Yet, the thong bikini accentuated her alluring curves, which had become more pronounced after the pregnancies. But the best was yet to come. Mandy stood at the foot of the bed, showcasing her stunning golden tan from the beach. Slowly, she pulled down her thong, revealing a small patch of untanned skin at the front. There were barely visible tan lines from the thong straps, but the area in her private region remained as milky white as before. My heart raced at the sight. Slowly, she undid her bikini top, letting it drape over her chest. With a gentle fall, the bikini landed on the floor, revealing the soft curves of her breasts. I moved closer, pulling her towards me by the waist, showering her with kisses and caresses. Her response was one of excitement. In just a few minutes, I brought her to the peak of pleasure. I savored the scent of her body multiple times. I missed her dearly, and she echoed the sentiment. "It's good to be back home," she whispered. The night was spent reconnecting with each other. Days later, Mandy was cleaning the bathtub while I watched from the hallway, admiring her movements. Sensing my gaze, she turned and asked why I was standing there. I confessed that I was admiring her and imagining what could happen if the circumstances were different. She playfully called me a pervert and teased me. Moving closer, she discarded her gloves and playfully swayed her hips towards me. Pressing her body against mine, she could feel my excitement. "That's how you tease," she remarked. Normally, I would have reciprocated, but I refrained. Suddenly, a sense of unease washed over me. Something felt off, but I couldn't pinpoint what it was. Mandy grew tired of my lack of response and playfully pushed me away, grabbing the gloves to finish her task. It was then that I realized the small detail that had been bothering me. There were barely visible tan lines from the thong straps, but the area in her private region remained as milky white as before. My heart raced at the sight. Slowly, she undid her bikini top, letting it drape over her chest. With a gentle fall, the bikini landed on the floor, revealing the soft curves of her breasts. I moved closer, pulling her towards me by the waist, showering her with kisses and caresses. Her response was one of excitement. In just a few minutes, I brought her to the peak of pleasure. I savored the scent of her body multiple times. I missed her dearly, and she echoed the sentiment. "It's good to be back home," she whispered. The night was spent reconnecting with each other. Days later, Mandy was cleaning the bathtub while I watched from the hallway, admiring her movements. Sensing my gaze, she turned and asked why I was standing there. I confessed that I was admiring her and imagining what could happen if the circumstances were different. She playfully called me a pervert and teased me. Moving closer, she discarded her gloves and playfully swayed her hips towards me. Pressing her body against mine, she could feel my excitement. "That's how you tease," she remarked. Normally, I would have reciprocated, but I refrained. Suddenly, a sense of unease washed over me. Something felt off, but I couldn't pinpoint what it was. Mandy grew tired of my lack of response and playfully pushed me away, grabbing the gloves to finish her task. It was then that I realized the small detail that had been bothering me. What was the reason behind her actions? What actions can I take? Is it necessary for me to have a conversation with Bob in order to uncover whether Helen was unfaithful? Eventually, I came to the realization that there was a foolproof method to determine if Mandy was being unfaithful. She had developed an addiction to staying in touch with all her friends and acquaintances. Mandy has a minimum of 600 or 700 friends on Facebook. Her Yahoo address book contains even more contacts. If she contacted someone in Belize, it is highly likely that they exchanged information through email to maintain communication. However, I am unsure if she would use her current email account since we both know each other's passwords. As a plan began to take shape, I finally drifted off to sleep. The following day, I was extremely fatigued and found it challenging to focus on my work. I scheduled an appointment with a divorce attorney for the next day, which was Friday. Then, I reached out to Bob and requested a lunch meeting. He was taken aback but agreed to meet. I disclosed my discovery to him. Initially, he laughed it off, but I managed to convince him that it was a serious matter. He intends to investigate whether Helen was unfaithful using the excuse of a severe case of the flu. I left the office early and arrived home at 3 p.m. Without delay, I installed keyboard tracking software on our home computer. It took a week before I could uncover the truth. Mandy logged into another email account using the username beachdreams1975. Her password consisted of the names and ages of our children. She would be turning 9 in just a few days after returning from Belize. She was in constant contact with Brad. The emails exchanged between Mandy and Helen were explicit. Additionally, Helen had engaged in a sexual relationship with a man named Steve. I forwarded all the emails sent and received by Mandy to my own email account and then erased any evidence of my surveillance. Subsequently, I sent Bob several emails from my own account. I discovered that they had engaged in sexual activities almost immediately upon arriving in Belize, and they even swapped partners multiple times. They were already discussing plans to meet again next month in Chicago. The girls would pretend to go shopping, while the two foolish longtime friends would pretend to attend a Chicago Blackhawks game. During a quick search of Mandy's and Helen's Facebook pages, I discovered that they had recently befriended two individuals from Illinois named Brad Simmons and Steve Reiner. Both of these individuals are married. It is clear to me now that I have the upper hand, you fools. I had a challenging task ahead of me. Despite Bob's denial, I kept my suspicions about Helen and Mandy's infidelity to myself. However, deep down, Bob never truly believed that his beloved wife would betray him. I understood Bob's perspective, especially when observing Mandy's behavior towards me and the children. It was difficult to believe that she would end the marriage. She always appeared so loving and caring that I sometimes doubted myself. It certainly helped that we continued to have regular, intimate relations. I decided to call Bob at his workplace. "Hello, Bob, it's Jack," I said. "Can you access your personal email account from work?" "Of course. Did you send me something?" Bob inquired. "Yes, I did. Please read all the letters and call me back," I replied. I patiently waited for Bob's call for half an hour. "Damn it!" Bob shouted angrily over the phone. "I'll kick her to the curb tonight. What a despicable woman. I love her, and I would do anything for her." Trying to calm him down, I asked, "Please, Bob, take a deep breath. I have a plan, and I need your assistance." Bob expressed his reluctance, saying, "I can't do it. I just can't. I have a strong desire to hurt her deeply." Assuring him, I responded, "We will do it, Bob. I promise you that. But for now, gather yourself. Call home and leave a message saying you'll be working late tonight. We'll meet at a pub in the old town and I'll explain my plans to you." Later that evening, Bob and I convened our first strategy session. "Bob, what can we do to harm our wives, besides physically hurting them?" I asked. Bob remained silent, not answering my question. "It's a shame. I wanted to humiliate them in front of their loved ones. You know, our father-in-law Tom adores his 2 daughters," I informed Bob. Bob agreed, saying, "That's a well-known fact. But you also know what he despises more than anything else in life." A knowing smile appeared on Bob's. After the divorce, he discovered that she had been granted custody of their 2 daughters. In addition to this, she received a substantial amount of alimony and child support, as well as a majority share of his company. To buy out her portion of the business, he had to borrow a significant amount of money. It took him several years to stabilize the company's finances. Eventually, he sold the business and lived a comfortable life, albeit alone. He made sure to visit his daughters and grandchildren regularly. I explained my plan to him. We only had 2 weeks left to act like devoted husbands, just as I had done. I advised Bob to catch a few colds and work long hours into the night. This way, he would be too sick or exhausted to engage in any intimate activities. We would reduce our intimacy to once a week for appearances, and soon we would be free from their clutches. Of course, I returned home very late that evening, pretending to have a terrible headache. I pondered the revenge plan for a while before drifting off to sleep. I was already aware of the impending betrayal when Mandy informed me that she and Helen were planning a shopping trip to Chicago. I encouraged her, saying it was a fantastic idea. She expected us to stay at a hotel in the city center as a display of my love and support. In fact, I personally booked the room using our joint credit card. The reservation was made under the names Mr. and Mrs. Johnston with double occupancy, as Helen and Mandy were supposed to share a room. The girls were thrilled. Bob even offered to cover the cost of the room. Another room was reserved under the names Mr. and Mrs. Dorothy, also with double occupancy, as Helen and Mandy were meant to share this room. Bob and I meticulously arranged everything so that each of them believed we were renting separate rooms. Little did we know that their lovers would also be present. The girls planned to take Friday off, fly to Chicago in the morning, and return on a late flight on Sunday. The following week, I spoke with Tom Raines, Mandy's father. I shared my idea of surprising the girls by bringing the kids and himself to Chicago for a family reunion. Since the trip fell just 2 weeks after our 15th wedding anniversary, Tom thought it was a wonderful plan. I inquired of Tom whether he could make arrangements for 3 rooms. He believed it would come as a significant surprise. Bob and I were deeply upset by the behavior of our wives. On the morning we dropped them off at the airport, they acted like 2 schoolgirls on their way to their first date, laughing at everything and nothing. They were filled with nervous energy at the security gate. We kissed them on the cheek, but they didn't even notice that neither Bob nor I expressed our love for them. Bob drove us back to town. I took out my cell phone and quickly made a call. "Hello, this is Johnston," I said to the private detective I had hired. "They will be landing in Chicago soon. Is everything prepared?" "Yes," replied Alan White. "They will be in rooms 201 and 203, and everything is already arranged for both audio and video. I will have everything ready for you when you arrive tomorrow." The following morning, we all gathered at the airport. During the flight, Tom switched seats with my son David and sat next to me. "Listen, son, don't think I'm just a foolish old man," he said. "You and Bob seem like you're heading to a funeral. There's something going on with you two. What's the matter?" "I apologize for keeping you in the dark, Tom," I responded. "I know how much you love your daughters more than anything in the world. Unfortunately, I have some terrible news. They are cheating on you, aren't they?" he asked directly. "Yes," I replied. "They have been sleeping with 2 men. They met and had a sexual relationship for 2 weeks while they were traveling to Belize. I have a private investigator gathering all the evidence we need for a divorce, and we will file it as soon as we catch them in bed with their lovers." Tom placed his hand on my shoulder in a paternal manner. "I'm truly sorry, son. I understand how much it hurts. I wish the few years they lived with me were enough to guide them in the right direction, but I fear that being raised by their mother for most of their adolescence has had a consistently negative influence on them." Tom began to cry. "I never thought I could experience such pain again," he said softly, regaining his composure. He stood up and returned to his seat. Alan White greeted us at the Chicago airport. He approached us with 2 envelopes, one intended for Bob and the other for me. Inside were incriminating photos and a DVD documenting the previous night's events. He mentioned that the process server would contact us soon and that his operative was keeping an eye on the 2 bedrooms. His assistant will inform us of the most compromising moment to catch the lovers off guard. Simmons and Reiner's wives will also receive similar packages by noon. Bob and I requested Tom and Alan to watch over the children for a bit. We needed to assess the situation. My heart sank when I saw Mandy in various sexual positions. There was even a photo of double penetration from 2 individuals as far as we could tell. They engaged in unprotected intercourse. Bob and I will have to undergo STD testing in Minneapolis. Alan White then phoned his assistant to confirm if the hotel was clear for us. The lovers had gone out for lunch, so everything was in order. Tom ordered 3 dishes. Bob and I asked for an extra key card for rooms 201 and 203, which were under our names. Both key cards were issued after the clerk verified our IDs. We informed the receptionist that our children had planned a surprise to avoid alerting our wives. We all headed up to the 3rd floor where our rooms were situated. After an hour of waiting, Alan White called. They had returned from lunch and were in their respective rooms. They had swapped partners. Mandy was now with Reiner, and Helen was with Simmons. He said, "I'm in the lobby, and the process server has just arrived. I'll send them to your room." I turned off the phone and got out of bed. "It's time to go, guys," I said cheerfully to the children. "And remember what I told you, Sheila, and you too, David. Grandpa and I will enter the room first, and when I give you the signal, you'll shout, 'Surprise, Mom!' Understood?" "No problem, Dad," said David, "and we won't enter the room until you say so." "Yes, that's correct. We understand everything, Dad. Go!" We ascended the staircase and halted in front of room 201. I inserted the key and silently unlocked the door. Tom and I entered, followed by the 2 children. However, they were not patient. The moment the door swung open, they exclaimed, "Surprise, Mom, we're here!" Mandy had engaged in sexual activity with Reiner. Our presence was truly unexpected. Reiner hastily reached for his trousers lying on the floor and swiftly put them on. He grabbed the rest of his clothes and hurriedly fled the room. Well, at least he reacted promptly. Mandy leaped out of bed and attempted to gather her clothes. "No, no, no, this can't be true. No, what are you doing here?" she exclaimed. "Hey, Mommy's naked," squeaked Sheila, who squeezed herself between Tom and me. I snapped my fingers and the process server entered the room. "Mandy Johnston," he addressed the only naked woman. "This is my mother," Sheila said, trying to be helpful. The process server handed her an envelope. "You've been served?" he stated, and took a photo of Mandy holding the envelope, attempting to conceal her breasts. He chuckled. "Come on, children. Let's leave Mom while she gets dressed." We exited the room. Mandy was sobbing on the floor. She knew all too well what was in the envelope. Bob and his children were in the hallway. "Bob," I said, "this is your responsibility now. Things didn't go well with Helen. Simmons was the aggressive type when interrupted during sex. He became very angry at the intruders. He struck Tom in the face." Bob needed no further encouragement to express his disappointment, and the first thing Simmons experienced was Bob punching him and Helen scratching his face in defense of her father. It was a decent gesture on her part to protect her old man. I entered the room, seized Simmons and tossed him into the bathroom, away from the children's view, throwing his clothes after him. "Get dressed and get out of here, asshole!" I declared. Tom, Bob, and the children left the room without any shame. Helen followed them, covered only with a blanket. Her father turned to her with a stern expression. "Return to your room and attire yourself as befits the youthful spirit you still possess," she said, before turning and walking into the bedroom. During the heated exchange earlier, the server, who was part of the proceedings, had temporarily exited, but now stood in the doorway. "Ellen, are you all right?" he asked. Upon receiving an affirmative response, he handed her an envelope. "You've been served," he declared. We then ascended back upstairs. Initially, the plan had been to stay the night there and have one final discussion with our wives. However, feeling unable to share the same space with Mandy any longer, I gathered our luggage and informed the children that we were returning home. Tom, on the other hand, chose to stay behind. He had significant matters to discuss with his daughters. Bob and his children joined us back in Minneapolis 4 months later. Despite Mandy's numerous entreaties for reconciliation, the court reviewed our situation and awarded an uncontested divorce. It required considerable persuasion from Tom for Mandy to agree to sign the divorce documents. As the house had been inherited from my parents before meeting Mandy, it remained in my possession. Furthermore, I obtained primary custody of our children and chose not to seek any financial support from Mandy. Tom ensured they were well provided for. Our remaining assets were divided equitably, and the subsequent Christmas, Tom gifted me a substantial amount to aid my financial recovery, explaining that it was derived from what would have been Mandy's future inheritance. Bob's divorce unfolded similarly, although they had co-owned their home. However, shortly after finalizing the divorce, Bob and Helen began to rekindle their relationship, and it seemed likely they would reconcile. Regrettably, as for Mandy and myself, reconciliation remains inconceivable. Although I believed her sincere apologies, her betrayal irreparably damaged my love for her, scattering it like dust across the beaches of Belize. For the sake of our children, we maintain a civil relationship, but that is the extent of my commitment. On one occasion, while waiting for the children to prepare for an outing with her, she questioned me. "I am intrigued, Jack. How did you come to know about the foolish incident that occurred in Belize?" "It was due to my fondness for tan lines," I responded, expressing my confusion. Throughout the entire trip, I was constantly wearing a bikini. We never visited a nude beach or engaged in any such activities. Reflect upon it, Mandy. What did you do each time you cleaned the bathroom using all the necessary chemicals? I gathered all the required items, donned plastic gloves, and rolled up my sleeves. She mentioned that you had forgotten the one thing you always did beforehand. I mentioned that you would remove your rings, including your engagement ring and wedding ring. There was no tan line on your finger. Thanks for listening to One Infidelity Hit. If you liked what you heard, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and drop us a like.